So welcome, everybody. We are here working with one of the Pathwork Lectures, 189, and we're exploring this lecture. It's on self-identity and consciousness in a new way from our usual, because we've run across this NotebookLM, which is a form of AI that you can upload PDFs to, and all of the lectures are in PDFs. And so it summarizes and has these suggested questions and these ways of kind of exploring the lecture that I'm hoping will be interesting and useful for us. And sort of the most abbreviated sort of summary of it is in this little audio description. So I'll turn it on again and hopefully everybody can hear me. Can you hear me at this point? Okay.
Totally
So
different people. Like 1 minute I'm ever feel like you're two totally different people? Like 1 minute I'm super organized, crushing my to-do list, and the next I'm, well, let's just say not so much.
We've all been there, right? That inner battle is something we're tackling head on today as we take a deep dive into the fascinating world of consciousness.
And to guide us on this journey, we're turning to Pathwork Guide, Lecture No. 189.
Which takes a pretty unique approach to consciousness, I have to say.
It really does. It goes beyond the individual, suggesting that consciousness isn't just something within us, but a universal force we're all connected to. Kind of mind-blowing, right?
It really makes you think. One of the things that struck me was how the lecture describes individual traits like kindness, procrastination, even anger as particles existing in this universal consciousness. We each embody a mix of these. Some we've integrated, some, well.
Not so much. So it's like we're all walking, talking puzzles of personality traits. Some pieces fit together better than others, and some we're still trying to figure out where they go.
Exactly. And the lecture suggests that the struggle many of us feel, that inner conflict, often comes from mistaking a cluster of these traits, especially the negative ones, for our true selves.
Oh, I know that trap all too well.
Yeah.
Getting stuck on those negative thoughts, those perceived flaws, it's like that inner critic becomes its own entity.
It really can, but here's a key takeaway. The lecture talks about the true self as something beyond those individual traits, whether good or bad. It's the part of us that's aware of them, that observes them.
So it's less about erasing those parts of ourselves we don't like, and more about understanding them, maybe even accepting them, but not letting them define us.
Exactly. It's about cultivating awareness without judgment. And that's where the lecture gets really interesting, laying out 4 distinct stages of self-awareness. It's like a roadmap to help us integrate those seemingly separate parts of ourselves and move toward greater wholeness.
Okay, a roadmap to self-discovery. I'm intrigued. Tell me more about these stages.
All right, so stage 1, imagine this. It's the blind battle. You know that feeling, right? Where you're just kind of at war with yourself, but you can't even put your finger on why.
Oh yeah, it's like, why am I sabotaging myself right now?
Exactly. But then, hopefully, we move to stage 2, the big aha moment.
Like we finally figure out what's going on in our own heads.
Yeah. We start to acknowledge those shadow parts we've been pushing down, the stuff we don't like to admit, even to ourselves. And you know what? The lecture says that acknowledging that stuff is actually freeing.
Really? You'd think facing those demons would make you feel worse, not better.
You'd think so, right? But it's like once you see it, once you acknowledge it's there, you separate from it. You realize, okay, that's a part of me, but it's not all of me.
Okay, so you're creating some distance between you and that negative trait, that pattern.
Exactly. And then because you've done that, you can move to stage 3, the explorer. This is where you start to realize you have choices. You don't have to be ruled by those old patterns anymore.
It's about recognizing you have agency. You get to decide how to respond.
Right. The lecture even calls them consciously chosen attitudes, like you're actively choosing how you show up. Pretty cool, huh?
That is cool.
Ugh.
Okay, so what happens when you start to exercise that choice more? Is that stage 4?
Stage 4 is where it all comes together. It's integration and expansion. The more you work on this stuff, the more you understand not just yourself, but like life itself.
So you're integrating all those little pieces into a more whole you. But the lecture also talks about a threefold dialogue, and I gotta admit, I'm a little fuzzy on what that means exactly. So about this threefold dialogue, what's that all about?
Okay, so the lecture describes it as this ongoing conversation between, get this, 3 different aspects of ourselves.
3. Okay, lay it on me.
It's our conscious self, those demons or shadow parts we talked about, and our divine self.
Hold on. We're having a dialogue with our inner critic, Andy some higher self.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild concept, but I think it speaks to how complex we are on the inside, right? Like we have all these
Yeah.
different parts of ourselves, and the lecture suggests that by acknowledging all of them, even the ones we don't like, we can actually tap into a higher level of consciousness.
So instead of trying to shut those shadow parts down, we should try to understand them.
It's more about approaching them with curiosity, maybe even a little compassion. Remember those consciously chosen attitudes we were talking about? This is where they come in.
Okay, I'm starting to see the connection.
So let's say your inner critic starts piping up with all its usual negativity. Instead of getting totally sucked in, you pause. You're like, okay, why is this part of me freaking out right now? You get curious about it.
So you're shifting from judgment to curiosity.
Exactly. And that's where this divine self part comes in. It's the part of us that can hold space for all of it, the good, the bad, the ugly. It's the part that sees us as whole, even when we're feeling totally fragmented.
Wow. That's a lot to process. This whole conversation has been pretty mind expanding, to be honest.
Right. Who knew consciousness was so complicated?
Seriously. But in all seriousness, this idea that we have the power to shift our own consciousness, that we can actually choose how we show up in the world, that's pretty empowering stuff.
It really is. And like the lecture says, the more conscious we become, the more we can bring that awareness into everything we do, our relationships, our work, our whole lives. And that's got to count for something, right?
Absolutely. It's like we become a ripple effect of something bigger. Well, this deep dive has been incredible. We've covered so much ground today, from those personality particles to the threefold dialogue. I'm definitely going to be pondering all of this. What about you? What were your big takeaways? Share your thoughts with us on our platform. We always love hearing from you. And until next time, keep exploring.
So let me stop the share for a second and just, what did you think? Any comments, any reactions? How was it for you? Did you feel like it was helping you, or?
First, let me get this straight. That's a conversation between two AI generated personalities? Seriously.
Seriously, based on feeding in the PDF of that lecture into this AI chat.
I don't know how they do it.
It is. It's quite amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it breaks it down in some other ways. So hopefully we can use that too. But yeah, it's quite.
Does it do that spontaneously, or do you have to plug it in and wait an hour or two for it to?
No, I mean, you wait a little bit, but it's not an hour. It's like it's pretty like you plug it in and it, uploads the text stuff quite right away, and it takes maybe 5 minutes at the most to generate the audio version.
Yeah.
This one, like I said, this lecture is a shorter lecture. I think it's only about 8 or 9 pages. And so, some of them I've seen, are a little longer in their summaries because of the length of the lectures. But yeah.
It's pretty efficient. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it doesn't take long. I wish, I wish it would take more than just PDFs. I'm trying to figure out. And also I don't know how to share, like I wish I could share that with Facebook, right? And send out the summary of the lecture, somehow on social media or something, because I think that, that would be of interest, but I can't figure out how to do that if it's possible. But it's a kind of, it's an experimental phase of working with this AI entity. So should we go back and look at the sort of the other ways that it's breaking it down? That's more like, with text rather than with the audio.
Yeah, sure. Unless anybody wants to say something first.
Yeah. Any more conversation on that? Okay. So, I mean, there's a lot of different ways, and I can't quite figure out if there's some kind of order to it all. It all feels like more like the facets of a diamond. And so it starts with this page. We have the summary. And so, again, I find it interesting, like how it kind of shifts the focus a little and summarizes it even more briefly. It says, this lecture focuses on the nature of consciousness and how it relates to self-identity. It argues that consciousness is not solely a human attribute, but rather permeates the entire universe, manifesting in various forms and aspects. The lecture explores the idea that human beings are conglomerations of various aspects of consciousness, some positive and some negative, and that the journey of self-development involves integrating and synthesizing these aspects. It emphasizes that true self-identity does not lie in any particular aspect of consciousness, but rather in the ability to observe, acknowledge, and make choices about these various aspects. Through this process, individuals can expand their consciousness and ultimately connect with their spiritual self. So, I have always loved this lecture for exactly this, and there's a way that in this little process group that we're doing, I'm exploring with everybody a process that actually supports this exact thing, this shifting of identification and this kind of being with all of these aspects in this exploratory, open, curious way that helps us, one, identify, with that and activates the higher self, and our own sort of self in presence, right? And uh, and then it also in doing that, like we see sort of both, like the guide in this lecture talks a little bit about sort of actively choosing certain attitudes, and I think that that is important. But I think there's also a receptive way that when we focus on what is blocking or covering over the natural movement, the natural growth, the natural change process in us, that when we just get present to the block, it begins to dissolve the block, and then we change. The movement happens spontaneously from our deep inner core. So I think that there's both, and both can be useful, but I find this process, like useful in helping us not feel like we have to do quite so much with our work and our ego. Like path workers are notorious for constantly working on themselves. And I remember, like when Donovan started talking about some of the awakening thing, he was saying, no, it's like you can't get to awakening sort of trying to fix yourself or keep working on yourself, right? That there's a kind of discontinuity in the spiritual process. And a part of that is sort of identifying, the part of us that is looking to change, looking to transform, but it's kind of coming more from the wanting to control things, part of our defenses, wanting to fix ourselves, wanting to appear better from the mask level, that kind of thing. So I think that, there's this beautiful thing when we can just kind of relax and sort of step out of that, because it's such a dominant aspect, and explore how change just happens naturally and spontaneously just by being in this state of the higher self, pure presence awareness, right? That's not identified with anything it's observing, but it is simply identifying whatever is there.
What was the
So
title of the lecture?
this lecture is Self-Identification, 3 Stages of Consciousness, I believe.
Okay. Yeah.
I can check, I can pull it up here. Hold on a second. Let's see. Yeah, Self-Identification Determined Through Stages of Consciousness was delivered February 12th, 1971.
Mhm.
So, and then from there, it's like, I even find sort of this timeline a little bit interesting. It kind of works more if you were looking at a PDF or a storyline or something like that. But even the way they did this, I find is kind of interesting. And so I thought it was saved, but I guess it's not. So it's generating it again, so you can see how it doesn't take that long. So, timeline of events. And so it's saying, it's not really a sequence of events. It's a lecture focused on explaining a philosophical and spiritual concept, the nature of consciousness and its role in human self-identification and spiritual evolution. Cast of characters, the Pathwork Guide. The speaker of the lecture delivering teachings on consciousness and self-discovery. Role, a spiritual entity providing guidance and teachings on spiritual development and the nature of reality. Background. The Pathwork Guide delivered a series of lectures known as the Pathwork Lectures over a period of 28 years. These lectures explored a wide range of spiritual, psychological, and philosophical topics aimed at assisting individuals on their path of self-transformation. And then Eva, the transcriber and editor of the lecture, the channel for the Pathwork Guide's teachings, founder of the Pathwork, a system of spiritual development that emphasizes self-responsibility, emotional honesty, and the exploration of the unconscious. She channeled the Pathwork Guide's teachings, which were compiled into the Pathwork Lectures. And then they, talk about the foundation and much more. So there was another one of these that kind of brought up, not just human beings, but beings, and they were talking about entities and stuff. So anyway, there's these different kinds of, timeline of events. One of the saved notes is the stages of awareness and conscious expansion. So this is one of the ways that he's kind of looked at this, or that the AI is sort of the facet that it's focusing on now, is the stages of awareness and consciousness expansion. So are we good? Is this kind of too heady? It's like a little different than, how I'm used to doing it. But there's a lot of material here, and I thought, well, let's just take some time and explore what's here. Feel free to break in, or, So it says, consciousness is not just a byproduct of human personality, but permeates all of creation. And then quoting from the lecture, it says, it exists in all matter, but in inanimate matter, it is solidified, much like petrified energy. As evolution progresses, the static condition of consciousness decreases, becoming more vibrant and mobile. And that involves also increasing in awareness. And I think this is really an important thing. I mean, there's a lot of channels out there right now talking about we're moving into 5D and this evolutionary thing, and it's, not the same as the guide, but, many concepts similar, right? And in this way, maybe slightly different words and everything, but I think this is where the guide is really talking about, and as, said in the beginning, well, there's a big change happening, and I'm coming in to kind of give you the, foundation to help yourself in this transformational process. And so over all of these times since 1957 until now, that's a good span. We've been in this evolutionary journey, and now, there's this kind of other channels coming in this sense, that there is a movement into a higher vibration of energy that will make us less dense. And when we are less dense, we will be, more capable of, having one, less pain and suffering, and two, being more creative. And the guide talks about in another lecture how we impress, the substance, the universal substance, that molds and expresses, and that we are creative sparks. And so many of the channels today are saying we're coming into a time where we are, living from that kind of creative moment to moment presence of being in the flow and the movement of consciousness and change as it's happening. They talk about riding the crest of this wave, right? And that crest is right each moment, and that in our consciousness and our, willingness to surrender into the movement and into the moment, we will know what we need to know. We will be inspired by Holy Spirit. We will have, our own guides and channel beings coming through us, to respond in each situation. So that it really is a kind of, I think, potential very different world and experience of life that we could be moving more soonly, more quickly, even maybe within our lifetimes, So human beings are conglomerations of various aspects of consciousness, some pure and integrated, others negative and destructive, existing like appendages. And, some of these channels I've been talking about, they're talking about the angels, right, which are the messengers of God, which are these pure aspects of consciousness that we also embody, right? So when you think of your divine aspects, everything that you are that is in the light, it's like that's aspects of your angelic nature, and your own divine qualities that are already integrated within you. And so those we're learning to kind of bring forth more fully, but to do that we have to kind of clear some of the and I guess integrate, right, these others that are more negative, more destructive, more immature. He uses that word quite a bit. And again, most of the time when we see ourselves in those lights, we feel shame, we feel self-judgment, we get sort of mad at ourselves. We think we should be better, or, we judge and get frustrated with, our limitations. And in some ways, it's true that they do limit us. But if we can take this attitude of patience and kind of acceptance that we're moving through and transforming these, and that it's part of a larger task that we've taken on that even takes a lifetime in some ways to accomplish all of this, then we can have this kind of humility, we can have this patience, we can have this, acceptance of the journey and the process that it takes for it to happen. So he says, quoting from the lecture after the beings of, the conglomeration of consciousness, says the task of each human being is to synthesize, unify, and assimilate these various aspects. This process of unifying consciousness is less difficult in higher states of consciousness. So, as we, evolve, it gets easier. Unfortunately, people are generally blind to what is happening within them and often deliberately perpetuate the blindness. The sources outline 4 stages of awareness individuals experience on their journey towards self-identification and expanded consciousness. The first stage is that half asleep stage, unaware of our true selves. We battle against the various aspects of ourselves that we dislike, that we struggle with, either consciously, semi-consciously, or unconsciously. We blame these or we blame others, for our difficulties. And then the first awakening is where individuals can acknowledge, observe, and articulate the aspects that they dislike, recognizing that these aspects are not the ultimate truth of who they are. So, I want to, I've been sharing this, and, you may have done this before with me, but it's a good opportunity because, again, it's highlighting this, and it's a very powerful little way of using a technique to help us do this, right? Get to this first awakening. And so, in this work on focusing that we've been doing, we notice, first of all, that sort of unconsciously, we talk about all of these aspects of ourselves as if they were us, right? Like I'm angry, I'm fearful, I'm anxious, I'm stubborn, I'm negative, I'm brilliant, I'm wonderful, but it's all kind of like this way that our language brings it together. It's kind of tricky because really I am that I am is like God, right? That's the creative statement. So when we consciously or unconsciously are saying I am this, like literally we become that, right? And it's not really the truth of who we are. Now we're just identified as that. And in being totally identified as that, we've lost access to the greater self that we are. And so, it's very interesting. This process suggests that we explore. So try this, go inside, see what you're feeling right this moment, and then try saying it to yourself as if it's the I am statement. I am feeling, I am, whatever it is, tired or grumpy or, you know, and then, try again, separating a little bit by saying what the guide is suggesting here, a part of me feels, and then fill in the blank. And notice that gives a little separation. Now it's not all of you. And then there's a final way that really brings in and activates this understanding that who we are is the observer, is the pure awareness that notices, rather than anything we're noticing, right? So who are we? We're not what we're noticing. If we can see it, that's not us, because who is doing the seeing? Who is being aware of it? And we can't kind of turn around and look at ourselves because it's what we're looking through. But it is our essential nature, that pure awareness. And so when we say it this way, like, so try this now and say, I notice that part of me feels, and fill in the blank, right? So now you have the I, that is that observer noticing the other part. Now that's relationship. And in that relationship, everything can be worked and healed. So, that's a part of this first awakening. And then, like from there, this observing eye is capable of really understanding, right? In this, he's saying new decisions and choices, but those come out of this deeply grokked realization and understanding of where that experience is coming from, oftentimes going back to childhood traumas or wounds or images and that kind of thing. And so when we can go sit and observe and feel these feelings, they begin to kind of bring understanding and awareness that really does also help us see ourselves, and often have compassion, on these faults and imperfections that we've been frustrated with and judging, and also have compassion for, the higher self parts that have been blocked in some way or not allowed to be seen or fully expressed. So he says, in the making choices, he says, the observing eye is capable of making new decisions and choices and can explore previously ignored options and possibilities. This involves adopting new attitudes like self-acceptance, learning from failures, and having faith in unknown potentials. So, here I think is a kind of like, depending on the stage that your work is at, sometimes this adopting of new attitudes is kind of done from sort of like an attempt to make yourself be a certain way that is not how you're actually feeling. And I don't think that's what the guide is quite saying here. But, he is saying we have free will and we can recognize, in a way, oh, I'm, feeling negative, victimized, somehow, uh, grumpy, unsorted, or something like that. And so, if I can acknowledge that and not judge it and not judge myself and not take, not judge others, just, like be with it, there's a different way that it can integrate, and we can learn more, like I can be curious, why am I feeling that way right now? And as I go into that and explore it, I see myself, I learn, I recognize. And so, that automatically then allows us to have these new attitudes of self-acceptance and learning from failures, and having more faith, because we begin to see, oh, there's this whole other thing that's possible here. So let me pause a minute. Any questions, comments?
So, Darlene, just to be clear, once again, this is an AI generated uh summation, I guess,
Exactly.
of the lecture.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I'm legally, I mean, I don't know, like, this guy sent us the link and so I've been playing with it, Bill, that I was saying. And so I'm assuming that I could just send people links. I don't know. But if you look under NotebookLM, and just Google that, you probably can, like get,
Notebook LM.
get
I
it
see
yourself.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see it
You
right
see it
there.
there?
Yeah.
That it's experimental and it says NotebookLM, and that's the name of this AI intelligence.
Wow. I'm impressed. But I'm also kind of confounded how something that doesn't really have a personality can talk about, you know,
Consciousness in such an erudite way. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
it is a little bit spooky, isn't it? And it does
yeah.
it, you can see why. But apparently, it's just really good at understanding human syntax and organization of, like points somehow. And then I'm
Yeah.
not sure. I mean, I just uploaded the PDF, but it probably also has access. I mean, clearly some of this about Eva and John and I think it must have, access from the web, other sources about Pathwork. So it may even be integrating other things because other people have been uploading lectures and there's ways that the lectures kind of weave together. So I don't even know, if it's just using this one lecture as discrete source. I think you could probably go back and find all of this in the lecture. It's quite amazing what is packed into the lecture. And this is just one saved note. I mean, there's like 6 or 7 of these that is, kind of covering similar, but, very different ways of
You almost kind of get the feeling that I don't know what to call it. What do you call this AI thing? What do you call it? That it? You call it a it? Or
I guess so. I mean, again,
okay, you almost kind of get the feeling that it has already read all 258 lectures and has a complete understanding of what pathwork is all about in order for it to take one particular lecture and really distill it down to its essence. I don't know. I'm kind of just stuck on the whole fascination of the AI thing, at the moment. But
We yeah, it's very fascinating to me. We just started implementing this thing at in VetMed. So we record the whole conversation with the owner about the pet, so into this program on like app on the phone. And it basically we put a kind of like a sample of what it should follow, like okay, this is the history, this is the clinical problems, presenting problems, whatever, into it, to follow the pattern. And then when we go back to a computer, it just writes the whole medical record for us based on all this, and it does a pretty good job. I was amazed to discover that myself in the past couple of weeks.
wow, yeah, I've had very little exposure to AI, and this is just like mind-boggling. Yeah,
Yeah, it really, I mean, it is. It's like, and I hope useful, it's like, I hope that this kind of like, and sometimes it feels like, it's comprehensive, but it doesn't feel like I feel quite the depth that I do when I take it from the lecture, right? Or somehow the energy
right.
lecture, or the guide's words or something. So, I
It's
don't know.
lacking the personal aspect of it. It's like when you read the lecture, you get the feeling that the guide is talking to you, you
Mm,
know, at least talking to the group of people who were in the room when Eva delivered the lecture.
right.
This is a lot more impersonal, I would say.
Right. And it's concept, it's like it's working with the concepts. But in some ways, it's we stumble with these concepts and we stumble to kind of
Yeah,
grasp them in the lectures. So,
yeah.
hopefully the both of them, it can be a both and is my hope, and stuff. So yeah. So are you okay with exploring some more of these breakdowns, or do you want to go to reading the lecture? What do you feel?
No, let's keep going. Let's see what AI has to say.
Okay. How are you doing, Davis? Okay. So I think I left off with this comprehension and integration, which is the next level, where the previously negated aspects are understood and integrated, leading to their dissolution. And that's a part of what it feels like happens in a way when we fully meet in this focusing processing that, like there's nothing that we have to do to fix anything. It's like just by meeting it there, it leads to integration and dissolution. So the process of purification allows the expanding consciousness to merge with spiritual reality. And that's the thing that really excites me about this, right? It's a psychological process, but its end result is really opening us to a new type of, consciousness and way of being as a human being that is very different than our prior, egoic way of identification and our sense of the defenses and the need for uh like protection and self validation, and all of these things that we go through, because as you go in this process, you discover the divine indwelling, and you discover the way of staying in the flow of evolutionary movement. And the way I've heard the angels talk about this new stage that we're actually going to go to collectively in whatever time it takes is, like this going from a karmic reality, which is based on cause and effect and sort of this cumbersome process of sort of remembering and researching and learning, to a state of pure presence where whatever we need, in awareness and understanding is in that moment. It's like the Akashic, anything that we need to know is available to us in consciousness, in that moment. And we are, simply, like being the channel for the divine through us into the planet. And that is going to give us our greatest pleasure and be of greatest service. So it's a kind of dharmic instead of karmic type of existence that we could experience, that would involve, our the exploration of our unique creativities and our unique gifts, as they are called forth moment to moment in life, by service, for others, or, great art or whatever we are creative for. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's part of the sort of vision that I'm beginning to see about what our potential future could look like. And I'm excited because, I've been studying this work since like 1984. And it's I've always sensed it there, but like it's still like I see it right there. The guide is really guiding us into this next level of living, in a different uh, way than we've ever done before. And they're saying, it's like it's a unique event in the cosmos, that a species has basically transformed itself within a lifetime like this. So continuing in Save Note, it is important to understand that spiritual consciousness cannot manifest itself if existing consciousness is not fully utilized. And so this is another thing that he speaks to in this lecture. And, it's like we can't, it's not just going to be, automatically given us, that we have to utilize existing consciousness that's going to lead to inspiration, vision, understanding, profound wisdom, and experiences from within. And following the path of least resistance, or just giving into blind involvement, settling for superficial existence, will keep individuals stuck in negative patterns and prevent the expansion and transmutation of consciousness. The sources emphasize that by acknowledging negative traits, individuals can experience a new freedom. This occurs because the act of acknowledgement shifts identification. And we've talked a little about that. When individuals are blind to their destructive aspects, they are controlled by them. But the moment they acknowledge these aspects, they cease to be those aspects. They become identified with the part of themselves that can observe, articulate, and choose how to deal with them. The real self has options, possibilities, and choices. Individuals can begin to identify with the observing part of themselves and no longer need to engage in self-hate, which I think is really one of the biggest, things. I don't know. I have to go back and read this lecture and see if the guide uses those terms, because I don't remember, recognizing it before and reading it. But certainly in my own journey, that was what I mostly saw was, like this whole process of defense creates this internal relationship that is one of self-hatred and attempt to control, or, force oneself to be other than what one is, right? And all of that is that control. That's the dark side. God gave us free will, and it's only the Luciferic consciousness that wants control. So when we find ourselves, in without these options, possibilities, and choices, then we're not really, in our God self. And we can recognize that carrying negative aspects is just part of the human task, the task of integrating and synthesizing them for the sake of evolution of this larger consciousness, right? It's like it's all, moving, collectively and individually in this kind of seamless and beautiful unfolding. And it is only after taking responsibility for the negative aspects that individuals can realize that these aspects are not their only reality, but appendages that carry for an evolutionary purpose. So again, the guide says in other lectures, so this is part of, it does come out in this lecture, but in other ways he talks about this in other lectures where he's saying, we actually, when we incarnate, we consciously select maybe, past difficulty, like parts of our psyches that are still trapped in negativity and fear and trauma in some way from other life experiences. Or in another lecture, he talks about, like we're vanguards of consciousness, and we, like expand so far out into the universe that we lose touch with, the source. And in that separation experience, we, create these defenses and, have to, protect ourselves and be the, sole source of things, and forget that the God, there's this other divine aspect of reality. And so we're kind of on our own, and the ego takes control, and we try to, do it as best we can. But, as we begin to incarnate with these aspects, we're bringing them back in so that they can understand, so that they can heal, so that they can, relax out of the trauma that they might have, ended a previous life in, or they might just be pieces of flecks of darkness, other person's traumas, even other ancestral trauma that we take on and take in, for this larger evolutionary purpose. Do people have a sense of that from other? I mean, I think it's kind of a more common concept now. I think first time I ran into it was in the guide, but I've always found that feels so right on to me. That our imperfections and our difficulties, like we brought them in, to be sort of our teachers, and we also, brought them in so we could heal them. So it's only after taking responsibility for the negative aspects. Nobody's coming in here. Hold on a second. Elizabeth is joining us. I'm not sure if it's Elizabeth. I think it might be. Hey, Elizabeth, are you coming? So I can't tell whether she made it. It doesn't look like it. I'm not sure. So I'm going to just continue. So it's taking responsibility for the negative aspects is where we can realize that these individual aspects are not our only reality, but they are aspects that we carry for evolutionary purposes. And this realization paves the way for integration, which is what we came here to do. Hey, Elizabeth, welcome. We're kind of doing this new thing. This is an AI generated summary of the lecture.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
This is totally foreign to me. What's going on here?
Exactly. Well, you're coming in, this is this NotebookLM as an AI, and we fed it a Pathwork lecture, and it has these summaries. And so we're just exploring. This is the first time people have seen this. So we're just exploring through some of these summaries of the lecture rather than reading the lecture itself. So, and noticing, like the brilliance of the AI in this, but also kind of like somehow it doesn't seem quite as personal as when we read a lecture. But anyway, that's what you're coming into the middle of. So you're welcome to just follow along.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm not quite sure how to do anything. All I see is you and some.
So you're not seeing. So I'm sharing screen. I don't know if you can get to that on your phone. And I'm sharing this
I'm on the
screen.
computer.
Oh, okay. So you don't see the screen?
I see the screen. I only see you. I don't see
Hmm.
anything else.
Strange. I don't know why that would be.
Pathwork Lecture 189 at the top, written there at the top.
Right.
Do you see me? Well, you must, because you said hello to me.
Yeah, I can see you. You're kind of like in the screen share for me. It's like I should be you should be seeing my screen. So and everybody else is seeing it, right? Frank, can you see my screen?
I can.
You do?
Yes, I see your screen.
Okay. So I'm not sure, Elizabeth, how to tell you to get to it, but I'm just reading from that screen. So I guess you can just listen and follow along if you want.
Okay.
On the top right of the screen, of your screen, Elizabeth, it'll say View. Click on
Oh, yes.
click on Standard, and you should be able to see what we're seeing.
Okay. Okay, there we go. Okay. Hi, everybody.
Hi. Okay, thanks, Frank. Yeah, that's helpful. So, and then I think I bounced out of the one I was reading, but we were almost done with it. So, but I think we looked at this one before. So let me see. So let me just kind of like do this one, which says, how does recognizing and integrating destructive aspects contribute to spiritual growth? So this is a, AI generated question that, comes out of this lecture. And then this is the AI response. I think, where am I?
I think it might be the last.
Yeah, here it is. So it says consciousness is not merely a human trait, but exists within all matter. However, in non-living matter, it is static, almost frozen state. As evolution occurs, this consciousness becomes more fluid and aware. And then humans are made up of different aspects of consciousness. And some of these aspects are pure and integrated, while others are negative and destructive. These aspects can be seen as attachments or appendages that we carry. Spiritual growth involves synthesizing, unifying, and assimilating these various aspects of consciousness. This process of unification is easier in higher states of consciousness. Many people are unaware of their inner workings and may even intentionally avoid self-awareness. The sources outline 4 stages of awareness people experience on their journey towards self-understanding and expanded consciousness. So this is kind of reiterating some of the territory that we already went through in these other levels. But, again, it's kind of interesting how it, brings it back from different perspectives and different questions. So, so we were talking about this before where, we start in this half asleep state, and we're just unconsciously struggling against whatever we like or dislike, consciously or unconsciously. And then we begin to recognize and observe that, there's aspects of ourselves, and we can see that they're not the totality of who we are. And so we can begin to bring awareness to the observer and to our identification with the observing I, so that we're observing these other traits within us and not identified with them, not merging with them, not believing that that's who we are, but that, that's something that is, being, in some ways you can say that's what we're channeling in the moment, and then we can say, well, is that really what I want to be channeling in the moment, right? We can make that choice of what is coming through, what's living through us. And we can do that through our free will and choice, but we have to first kind of be able to separate and not identify, because when we are identified with something and we see it, then we usually go into judgment of it and we start trying to fight or run from it, right? And so we're engaged in this duality with it and this battle with it that just tangles us up. So a part of the freedom of, having this, identification with the observing self is very important in our evolutionary journey. It really helps as we can develop that aspect of ourselves. And he says then that the observing I emerges capable of making new decisions and exploring previously overlooked options. And this involves embracing new attitudes like self-acceptance, learning from mistakes, and having faith in their potentials. And then there's 4th stage is comprehension and integration. And this stage involves understanding and integrating the previously rejected aspects. So, this is a part of the problem is that we reject these parts and we can never really separate or cut them out, like love embraces, love unifies, and it is through that acceptance and, being with them in this kind of presencing of the self in presence with whatever is here that actually allows them to heal and transform and move back into their divine original nature, according to the Pathwork Guide. And so he says this stage involves understanding and integrating the previously rejected aspects, ultimately leading to their dissolution. This purification process allows the expanding consciousness to merge with spiritual reality. So, that's a beautiful way, I think, of understanding this. Any questions, comments there? So the sources stress that spiritual consciousness cannot emerge if we do not fully utilize our existing consciousness. Using our present consciousness leads to inspiration, vision, understanding. So we can, work with ourselves. We can explore. We can be curious. We can seek. Like they say, seek and you will find. But if we don't seek, then we're not going to arrive. So there's this deep wisdom, and these inner experiences that we can, begin to have if that's what we're looking for. So choosing the path of least resistance, however, and succumbing to kind of unconscious blind actions being triggered, accepting a superficial existence, will keep individuals stuck in these negative patterns and prevent the expansion and transformation of consciousness. And acknowledging the negative traits, actually, rather than, like most of us are so afraid of doing that, like it brings up shame, it brings up, with self-doubt or self-judgment, right? And it's kind of tricky because if we're still in our identification with these aspects of ourselves and we acknowledge them, there's no way that we can do that without, being in our idealized self-image and our judge and our critic. And now we're, hating ourselves, polarizing against ourselves. And so it sort of is difficult, and that's part of why we have, we're running from that all the time. But the guide is really saying if we can like face and acknowledge and recognize that everybody has negative traits, and we don't have to be ashamed, and it's not our fault. It's actually part of our spiritual task. We chose to bring them in. We are the light that came here to transform them. We don't have to be ashamed of our courage, of our willingness to incarnate carrying this stuff, and doing our best to find the light, bring it into the light, and heal ourselves and heal our love so that we can then share in more and more beautiful and deep ways, hopefully even to heal the planet. So it's it's this transition. I don't know if anybody wants to speak to this, because most of us are still at in varying levels, where we see our faults, or we feel embarrassed, or really judging of ourselves about our imperfections. And so just notice, like if that's still going on for you, maybe in a particular, aspect or particular imperfection that you're kind of still stuck with and not able to acknowledge, and be okay with. Because it's not just acknowledge. I mean, it's like not, but in some ways we have to be humble. We have to accept that we're not perfect, and so it's not, that doesn't, just because we have this doesn't make us terrible beings, right? We are children of God, and when we can know that, and we discover that we have negative traits, instead of running away from God and trying to hide them from him, we can run into his arms and say, help me. I see this. I want it changed. I want healing. I need help. And this kind of childlike humility and ability to accept our imperfections and our limitations and our immaturity, our incapacities, this allows us to receive the help that we need. We can't do it by ourselves, and it's the ego that thinks that it can. So yeah, Elizabeth.
When you were talking about that, about we want to hide from God, it made me think about the Old Testament and Adam and Eve, and they hid from God when they realized they had gone against him.
Right, exactly.
And when you said that, I was like, whoa. Is everyone else picking up on that, or is that just like me? I don't know. Anyway,
No,
I don't know.
I think it is implied in that, and then in the Pathwork Lecture, the fall of the angels kind of precedes the being kicked out of the garden too, in some way, or I don't know, they're similar myths, kind of, connected in some ways. But I think it's reflecting mythically exactly to this point. So thank you for A good comment. Other people get the connection? And so then we're shamed, and in that shame, we are kicked out of the garden, kicked out of connection to God. And it's really not God's will, I don't think. I mean, I guess in the Bible it kind of implies that, but in my own study, I think it's this psychological expression of our own self judgment and shame. And that's why I think, the master, Christ came to teach forgiveness, right? Came to teach redemption, came to teach original blessing rather than original sin, and came to remind us that, we are loved. So,
I've never
you know,
heard of original blessing. Is that of the Pathwork, or did you just create that?
no, and I didn't create it. It comes from Matthew Fox, who was one of my favorite. He was a Catholic priest. He was excommunicated and became a minister, Episcopalian minister, and has a book by that title and a whole kind of re-examination of what I call churchianity, from this light of, the focus on original sin, when in fact, the very first of the Bible is, God created the heavens and the earth and he saw that it was good. That's original blessing, right? And so we want to start with that as the foundation in our connection, is what his position is on that. And yeah, it's a very good book. There's a lot of, beautiful things that he has to say about are sort of misunderstood kinds of things that, I think some of the ways that we've been taught about these things is somewhat distorted. There's always truth in it, but, it's like you have to. So the guide, I think, it does a good job of helping us like discern and see. I use him as a good foundation for that. Okay, so let's see. When we acknowledge native traits, it leads to a new sense of freedom. This is
Charlie?
because, yeah.
I think Davies wants to speak.
Oh, absolutely. Sorry. Thank you. Didn't see you, Davis. I don't know if you know where to do the hand thing, but you can just, raise your hand in the thing or whatever. Go ahead.
You have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you, Frank. Where I got caught up is I can identify the negative traits, but it's the attachment to them and not wanting to let go of them and not ask God for help and like almost like keep it there.
Yeah. So, but if you're, even doing that, like you're saying, your higher self, notices that a part of you is attached and wants to keep your negative traits. And if you can do that rather than saying, "Oh, I'm attached," or something's wrong, like there's this way that we can work with it, and then you can go in and explore that attachment, right? Who is that attachment? Why is that attachment there? How does that attachment feel in your body, in your energy system, right? In parts of your being, so like there's lots of ways that as we do this focusing and sitting with it, we can understand it. And in that understanding and presencing with it, it will transform. And then, there's always the carrot and the stick approach. The stick part is that, like each time we choose, to express the lower self, the negative intention, we suffer, we pay the price. There is a price. And so eventually, we begin to, choose differently, from that as well. But most of the choice comes from, and the highest choice, and what God wants is he wants us to choose to love. and wants us to recognize that, the greatest pleasure, like this is what the guide says about that negative pleasure and negative attachment, is that, we think it's the only pleasure or the goodness of life, and yet he says it's very pale in comparison to true divine pleasure. And he says we can't really receive true divine pleasure until we can give up the, attachment to the negative pleasure. But we don't have to force ourselves. We don't have to judge ourselves. We can just recognize, oh, I have attachment to negative pleasure in these ways. And the more that I can, just keep paying attention and learning, being curious, exploring how this works in me, where it came from, why I'm attached to it, what I believe about it, right? All of those things will help me unravel it. And then with the help of God, and we will get to the place where we can ask, then we can be free. Does that help?
It does. And then, like, as you were saying that, there was this, it kind of like an epiphany of like the fear of divine pleasure.
Absolutely.
And the
Good to
fear
see.
of peace and ease and
Exactly. Yeah. And so feel into that right now. Like, how do you know that? Where do you sense that in your being? Because just by getting, being present to it, like, oh, I see you. Who are you? Why do you feel that way? It's a part of you. It's not all of you. And by, opening and exploring it, and wanting to get to know it, wanting to befriend it, wanting to help it, maybe, right? And as we do, and try to approach it, like we can see, like what it needs and how it needs us to be in relationship to it. And usually that's a repair of some earlier, or another even lifetime kind of relationship wounding. And so as we can, come present, and then through us, divine love comes present, because it really is that is the final, freedom. But unless we can, like feel and embrace that in ourselves, all of ourselves, and know our essence, know our true nature, even in its imperfection, and not be a hard ass or a judge or terrible with ourselves, right? But um, I understand that we are, we are here, we are children here, learning, and the best way to learn is from our deepest desire to want to participate in the love and the beauty and the possibility that's here for us in each lifetime. And so our inner yes to life is, I think, what can lead us. And then, where we experience difficulty, suffering, it's also feedback and helps us learn and grow. But it doesn't make, they say like shame is this, emotion that says, not that you've done something bad, or, that you've made a mistake, or you've missed the mark, or you've committed a sin, but that you are sin, that you are bad, that you are, it's that identification as your basic nature. And that's not the truth. That's, what the devil wants us to believe in some way, because that will keep us from God.
Darlene, I keep feeling like the next exploration should be all the personality parts, because the personality is so fragmented into so many parts. And we really, I think, be helpful to understand what those parts look like when they're activated and who's running the show who's driving the bus at any particular time when those parts are activated. Because I think a lot of understanding the self is understanding what part of your personality is actually driving the bus at any particular moment of your
Right.
dispatch, you
Right.
know?
And understanding what that part is up to and what it needs and how
Yeah,
to, work with
yeah.
it, right? And
Particularly
so
the wounded child. The wounded
mhm.
child tends to drive the bus a whole lot more than any other part of the personality.
And it does that often, like because we notice that it is, and then we judge or shame ourselves, and then the child feels disconnected and not supported, and it doesn't know it's doing the best it can. So
Right.
there's a lot of and the other thing that you're saying, Frank, is basically what this process, and I know that it's still not something that you're quite relating to, but it really does do that, but instead of doing it conceptually so much, it does it embodied, and it still brings forth the imagery, the conceptions. It's like it doesn't leave those out. You meet your inner child. You may have an image of it, a vision of it, and you may see it within you. You may understand it through all of a sudden, as you're being present to what's alive in you, what's calling for your attention, and you feel the sensation in your body. That very sensation will lead you into that childhood wound and into the recollection of what you know created that. But it'll take you beyond that, because, and that's a part of it, is it's not just understanding that, but knowing that all the child needs now is for us to be there for ourselves. And we keep, from the child place, we keep wanting somebody else to come and save us. Now maybe that could be God, but we also need that place where we are taking that self-responsibility and recognizing that we can't receive God's love unless we love ourselves. And so, if you don't have some kind of compassion for your own struggle in life and others' struggles in life, it's like, and these parts of your struggles in life, right? That get lost. I mean, I have these ADHD parts that, are just really, they
Uh,
struggle a lot. And they used to make me mad, frustrated. I used to judge myself, blame myself, feel like, something was terribly wrong because I couldn't control that. Now, it's much easier. And maybe there is a healing. I don't know, but I'm not, like I'm not causing more wounding by hating myself for my imperfections. And I'm, simply humbly just keep walking the path in front of me, doing the best I can, and seeking to understand when parts of me, come up that are reactive, are the inner child, and working with those. So you're right. That's definitely the always the work. And that's why this, process is inner relationship focusing. So it's about focusing on the inner relationship, right, that we have with all of these parts of ourselves. And so, again, it's not just this magical occurrence. We have to pay attention. We have to work with this stuff. We have to explore it. We have to pay attention and go inside and notice what is happening within us. We have choices in how we react and to what we observe within ourselves. So that's the first choice. We observe it, and then almost immediately we react against it, or we, you know, feel bad about ourselves or something like that. So, we don't even recognize that we're unconsciously, choosing how we are, being with ourselves. And so instead of succumbing to hopelessness or expecting immediate change, we can choose a realistic and patient attitude, persistently working to identify, observe, and understand our negative aspects. And this conscious effort, utilizing our available knowledge, broadens our range of attitudes and feelings. As we continue on this path, the greater consciousness of our spiritual self merges with our conscious mind. The key lies in engaging in a three-part dialogue between the conscious self, the destructive aspects, the conscious mind and the divine self, and the divine self and the destructive aspects. So it's kind of like this three-way, inner dialogue between our conscious self and the destructive. So I have to be in relationship with my destructive aspects. And then my conscious mind has to be in relationship with my divine self. And then also the divine self is in relationship with the destructive aspects. And there's a whole other lecture that, we can get into a little bit more later on how this, dialogue for three voices, or how this way of, working in this interrelationship process can help us grow and develop this more and more, our higher self-consciousness. So by recognizing and working through these stages, we can expand our conscious minds, allowing for the integration of wisdom, truth, love, energy, and the strength to transcend painful opposites. We can overcome the fear of annihilation that arises from not knowing our true selves. And we can experience the fullness, richness, and infinite potential of life. The sources emphasize that identifying with the observing self and not the observed eliminates the need to limit ourselves to negative aspects or false persona. Ultimately, it is through self-identification and conscious effort that we can access the power and fearlessness of our true spiritual identity. The sources you provided offer a deep understanding of how acknowledging and integrating our destructive aspects is crucial for spiritual growth. By moving through the stages of awareness and taking responsibility for all parts of ourselves and engaging in conscious effort, we can achieve a higher state of consciousness and realize our true spiritual potential. Okay, so, that's just one of those questions that are part of this guide. So I think it's probably getting time to wind up, but let's see if there's anything more. I don't, if people want to. Oftentimes we go another half hour, but it feels like this is kind of a little bit redundant too. So, so any final? Hey, goodbye, Elizabeth. Did you want to speak? Go ahead and unmute yourself.
I see it now.
Can you go to full screen share, Darlene? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Hold on a second.
How do I do
Stop
that?
share.
there you go.
Okay, that's better. What was I going to say here? Well, the way that the guy talks about it's very intellectual to me. I think at this point in time, my evolution, I kind of think like as a child, we have natural kind of hiccups along the way, defects of character, whatever you want to call them. And we get corrected by our parents, and they do the best they can. They probably are not doing it very well, balancing correction with love and discipline with love and all that. We get out of balance, and we're taught to repress those because we've got plenty to do otherwise. In any case, so we just repress those feelings because we don't know what to do with them. We aren't taught how to handle them, so we just kind of push them to the side and keep working and keep hoping that things will just work out on their own. And when we come to wanting to like not succumb to these when the patterns become painful enough, then is my understanding that that's when we start to like seek another way than the way that we evolved based on our family and environment, schooling, and all that. And this acceptance is this acceptance, I think, can be a lot easier than the way the acceptance, I believe. First of all, I think it's really important to do it as a group. I think individually it's very difficult to do. And I think once you start realizing, when you start when you love yourself, you start realizing you don't want to do certain behaviors because that's not, because we reap what we sow. So we do something, we get angry at someone, it just comes back to us. So we want to like stop doing that. So and the meme, since we can't kill it, which was a natural kind of way of trying to deal with this part, the only solution is to accept that we're we're not more evolved than we are, and that's a practice, and it's practice within community. So that's where you and then once you start realizing you can't forgive the other, because we see the other person's stuff all the time, so much clearer than we see our own stuff. You can't forgive the other until you forgive yourself, because ultimately it takes two to tango in any kind of um, disagreement or whatever. And so everybody has a piece, but for us to get beyond the current story, we have to like work with whatever piece that we're aware of in this disagreement, whether it's 5% or 95%. We have to work with that, and we can say, okay, I see their stuff, it's mostly theirs, but we have a piece and we need to look at it. And so when we look at it, whatever piece it comes obvious to us. We don't have to go into like understanding. I mean, I come from an analytical background, so I was caught a lot in trying to understand all the aspects of my story, and I've come to realize that's not really what the story is here. And what the story is whatever obviously comes to you, work on that piece. Just work.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Just work on that little piece, and
in each moment, right? It's meeting each moment what's coming, and that's how we navigate. That's what tells us what our next step on the spiritual path of evolution is what's arising out of this moment. Exactly. And that's where I think the process, and this is a different process than you may have done in Pathwork before, but it's, I think, similar to doing some embodied work with those feelings. Like, how do they shift? Because you know we can be aware, but oftentimes it's takes a time, a process to help us move.
They're very slippery. Those parts of us that are our character defects are very slippery because we don't want to think of ourselves like that. So they slip away real easily. And once you kind of like see that or get that or whatever, and then it becomes easier to forgive the other because you've got your own stuff that you have a hard time controlling and understanding and working with. So then it's much easier when you see their stuff, their stuff. My computer isn't working very well. Once you start seeing that, then it's easier to forgive the other. And when you forgive the other, you get the forgiveness from God. And even if it doesn't happen immediately, we exercise our faith muscle that it will happen. We will receive it at some point that's critical to our evolution because God's good. When we remember God is good, He's always good. So if we don't perceive Him as good, that's kind of like a little, a hiccup that we have, and we have to be a little more conscious, and we can, address it by saying, God, I don't think of you as being good all the time. So help me see that's not, help me to be remembering that that's not true. So we can just kind of have this constant dialogue, but it's critical, as you said, to stay in the moment, this very moment. I mean, in some places they talk about one day at a time, and then some places they talk about one moment at a time. And you have to be pretty advanced to be one day at a time. I'm more in the one moment at a time type. And then you get to these points where you feel like as though you've overcome something, just to find out you get thrown down again to realize, no, I haven't. And then you start realizing, oh, we're all human. And oh, I can forgive the other because, look at me. I'm still stupid and whatever, all these bad characteristics too. So then you can start forgiving the other, and then it kind of like helps in this whole process. But it's funny because, I had a hard time with that whole concept. And maybe it's just like I've heard it enough now that it's sunk in. And that before it was just like went down to the intellectual level. It didn't penetrate down into the heart, into the gut kind of type thing. But
Yeah, it has to be lived. It can't just be a concept. And there's different, ways of that. But I think, again, this is me, and we probably need to, wind up pretty soon. But there's just this sense that I have that, and maybe it's my own journey, because like what I discovered and what you're describing is how you found self-love and self-forgiveness and acceptance of our imperfections and stuff like that. And it's a key, where we're not being so harsh on ourselves with our ISI, which is just like the guide says, a pseudo solution, and something false, right? And so as we can accept our realness, and if we can embrace ourselves, then I think that it makes a huge difference. And it's not like, oh, I'm wonderful, I'm great, but it's just really understanding that, like you said, we're all imperfect, and we're all, where I am identified with is no longer my imperfections, but the part of me that has, given as much as I know how to give, to grow and to learn and to transform and to, try to find this new potential of, living moment to moment, which I think is where we're trying to go
well,
outside of.
the other thing that has helped me a lot is the realization that we're one.
Yes, absolutely. We're totally one. And
And
then the guide says, like, just like we have many different parts inside of us, humanity is one being with many parts that we are each of, so it's part of like the work of integrating our internal parts will help us also in integrating our unitive, and then our way of being with each other, like you said, being in community, integrating with all of our brothers and sister parts in the outer world, will help us also integrate our internal parts. And the more that they can be accepted, embraced, I think the more they integrate. So when we say, oh, this is bad, it has to be separated from me, it's an appendage, and I can't be responsible, I can't integrate it, I can't find the deepest truth of. The guide says it was originally a divine quality that for some reason got in distortion. And so if we can understand that and see its original nature, then we can reclaim it. So anyway, great discussion. Thank you everybody for
Thank you, Darlene.
joining in, and I hope, hopefully the AI was kind of interesting to explore. So
thank you,
we'll,
Darlene.
yeah, good to see you,
Night,
Elizabeth.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye, Davies.
Bye.